Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Am Nemu, and our guest today is Michael Rutkowski. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, so this is a topic that we normally don't address, but I recently attended, my sister invited me to Felipe's, where you had a workshop about estate planning. So
Yeah.
you're an attorney, of course. And really, what I really enjoyed about it, Michael, is that it was so informative. It was something that my husband and I had previously thought about, kind of in the back of our minds, but didn't really take full action.
Yeah.
But then I think hearing you speak, I learned so much. And then I was sharing this with our community, with family and community members. And I realized that sometimes our community, this puts it like in the back burner, this topic. I'm not sure. Maybe we're not the only ones that do that. I don't know. Yeah. So I thought this would be great, to have you come and just share some of the things that you shared with us, including, you are you founded Michael or the Rutkowski law firm, which
Yes.
is in Rochester. You have two locations, Rochester and Bloomfield.
Two physical locations. So downtown Rochester and then also in Bloomfield Hills. But we serve family now, since COVID, we serve families virtually all over the state. And we have a team of mobile notaries that can help if we need to sign and execute documents. So it's been
great. So, well, before we start going into why it's important for estate planning, for people to start looking into it, at what age should they start and all that good stuff, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you were born and raised in Rochester, Michigan, where you live now. It's a very beautiful city. I visit the park often over there in downtown. But tell us how you got involved in this profession, why you got involved in it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been practicing law about 15 years now, of which time I've mostly been doing estate planning, but I started my career in workers' comp insurance defense. So I was representing insurance companies, driving all over the state to say that people weren't as hurt as they say they were on the job. And it never really felt right for me. I just I was like, maybe this is just what being a lawyer is all about. It's kind of like the show Suits, if you watch that, but it never really sat well with me. And then all my friends started having kids, asking me, hey, Mike, I think there's supposed to be something I should do now that I have kids, like help me with that. And so I started doing some basic estate planning for some friends and just loved it. Absolutely fell in love with the process of helping families. Practicing law in this area is just so different. At the end, this weight has been lifted off of families' shoulders and you're getting hugs, and it's just a totally different experience. And so ever since then, it's been about 15 years now. It's all we do.
Wow, 15 years and what, 3 daughters later, and you have two Labrador retrievers.
Yeah. I've got three daughters, 12, 10, and 8. What a blessing they've been. And, it's just been so good.
So you have your hands full. But I think this is also what I sense from you is knowing, caring about these topics. I think there was another person you discussed now that I don't know if it was your mother or your aunt. Can you share that a little bit?
So the helping friends was how I really got into estate planning. But a couple of years into my estate planning career, my grandmother got sick. She was about 90 years old at the time. She needed help, and we didn't know as a family what to do. Meaning she needed help daily. She didn't have the funds to pay for someone to come into the home. So my aunt ended up quitting her job to come and live with my grandmother. And she had her own family. She had a spouse, kids. And I just knew there was a better way. And so that's what really got me started in my career in elder law planning, which is helping families protect and preserve their assets from the high cost of long-term care, which can be $10,000 to $15,000 per month. So I've kind of spent my entire career learning and educating others about what are your options when it comes to long-term care, so that you don't have to use all of your retirement savings for that, that extraneous cost.
Okay, so I remembered, yeah, that story really touched me because I too dedicated 5 years of my life taking care of my mom who lived with us
You were a
while I was
caregiver,
with our
yeah.
kids. So I
Okay.
really felt that when you were sharing that, and I wish I did have more resources at the time, but it's okay. God provides, and
Yeah.
we got over the hurdles that we had. So now let's get into the estate planning now.
Sure.
Why is it important? What does it look like, and why is it important to educate ourselves about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Education is really the starting point of for estate planning. I think the TV teaches us some really incorrect things about what an estate plan looks like. So often, everyone thinks like a will is the most appropriate tool, estate planning tool to accomplish what they're looking to do. But let's just touch a little bit on like what are our options when it comes to estate planning. A lot of families come to us, they want to avoid the probate process. So there's a probate court that will administer your assets after you pass away, essentially get them from you to your loved ones. But with that comes a lot of time and money. It's very time consuming to go through that probate process. It can take anywhere between 9 and 18 months. So those assets are completely frozen. You can't do anything with them. You can't access the bank accounts. Everything is locked up for 9 to 18 months until a judge gives you access. Then also the cost, so it can cost anywhere between 5 and 10% of your estate if it has to go through probate. Now that's attorney fees, that's court costs, it all adds up. But let's just say there's a house worth $100,000. It could cost 5 to 10,000 just to get that house through the probate process. So that's why a lot of families are coming to us. They're originally thinking, okay, I want to make sure that my kids get my stuff if I pass. And I want it to go to them as easy as possible and avoid the probate court. That's usually like the starting point of all of our conversations. Any questions on that?
No, and that's the one thing I think that was scary. Like when I was hearing you say that, I think I equated an estate fund, I'm sorry, to a will. I didn't really
Yeah.
see too much of the difference between them.
Yep.
And it was just a matter that, okay, well, obviously things would go to your children or whoever you named in the will, but then when you broke it down, it was very scary to think that there would be other, or the government would get involved in that way, and then there were ways, not so complicated it seems, to protect yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. So many families come to us wanting to do the things that maybe a trust does. But the first thing that they say to us, I want to put in place a will so that we avoid probate, we protect our assets, all those things. Those are usually things trusts do. So maybe it's a good time right now to talk about the differences between wills and trusts. That's probably the number one question we get in our office is what's the difference between a will and a trust? And there's 4 main differences. So the first is that a will has to go through probate and a trust avoids the probate process because essentially, a will is just a good suggestion to a judge as to what you want. It's essentially an evidence of what you wanted during your lifetime to happen to your stuff. It gets submitted to a judge, where a trust does not do that. A trust completely avoids the probate court. Second big difference is because a will goes through probate, it's public record, where a trust becomes completely private. This is where if celebrities do a terrible estate planning, we get to learn all about, who's fighting over what, how much there was, and it's very entertaining. But really for what it's worth, keeping it private keeps people from fighting over things because everyone knows how much there was and all those things. Families fight over assets all the time. And essentially what happens when the will goes through probate is we have to send out something called notice to interested parties. You essentially have to send a letter to every family member and say, hey, in 2 months, there's going to be a hearing in the court. If you feel like you deserve any more of the estate than you are getting, just show up on that day and you can tell the judge why you deserve more. So it really just encourages people to fight over the assets and stuff. So it's really important to keep everything private, just to keep the family, the familial relationship strong, because I've seen so many families ripped apart because it went through the probate process. Third big difference between wills and trust is the flexibility in the distribution of assets. So what I mean by that is if a will goes through probate, as soon as the judge says so, we're going to make those distributions out to whoever the beneficiaries are. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, I've got 3 daughters. They're young. And if I were to give them assets right now, they would not save up for college. They would not put them in retirement. I mean, honestly, they just buy iPad games. As funny as that is, like that's all they care about at their ages. And so in a trust, you can set up things that say, you can have access to it, half of it at age 25, the other half at 35. And if you need any money in advance for things like medical bills, food, like all that stuff, like I would provide for you as a parent, they can get it early through a trustee, but they can't get it just to go out and spend it on anything they want until those ages that I say. You can't do that in a will.
And also my understanding from during the workshop is that you can change it. So say you live longer than you thought and your children are now, so there's different ages that you might, something dawns on you and you said, well, you know what, I want to change the age. I want to change this, how I set this up,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. You can change it as much as you like. Absolutely. As I know my kids right now in their young ages, as they get older and closer to age 18, I might change it up, and you don't have to treat everyone the same. I mean, I know right now that like my oldest daughter, she's very responsible. My youngest one, well, maybe not so much. So, as they age and mature, you can kind of treat everyone just a little bit differently. Maybe you want to protect a little bit more for one than the other. Yeah. And then fourth and final difference I want to jump in on real quick is asset protection. We can protect assets in a trust. We cannot do that in a will. And so what are we trying to protect assets for? Couple things. We can protect our assets for our beneficiaries. So the money that you want to give to your kids, if that's who you want to give it to, you can make sure that, if they're in the middle of a divorce, that soon to be son-in-law or daughter-in-law doesn't have any access to this. Maybe they got some other bad things going on in their life, like they were in a car accident or being sued. Like, you don't want to give them money when something bad is going on, drugs, alcohol addiction, anything like that. We don't have a crystal ball to look into the future to see what's going on with our kids' lives. So maybe this is a great opportunity to have a separate trustee do that for us. And then asset protection for you yourself, the person who put in place the plan. We can protect our assets from long-term care costs, so that $10,000 to $15,000 per month. We can protect assets from taxes, from liability. If you're in a car accident or sued, we see all the billboards for all the personal injury lawyers out there. There's a reason for that. I mean, most car accidents end up in some type of lawsuit. Let's protect against that if we can. There's certain trusts that do those things.
What would you say the biggest hesitation that people don't pursue setting up an estate planning? So, is it, I had mentioned to you sometimes, like in our culture, maybe they think it's kind of bad luck to put that out there. But do some people just think, well, they're too young? Others might think, are they too old, or do they have not have enough things in their names? I mean, what are the reasons that prevent people from pursuing that?
Great question. Well, statistically, less than half of people have an estate plan in place, which is just sad. That being said, there's a variety of reasons. I think the biggest one we see is people think that there's some kind of asset level you have to have in order to put an estate plan in place. Like whether it's 500,000, $1 million, there's just this misconception out there that there's a certain amount of wealth that you need in order to have an estate plan. Truly, to me, if you have kids, if you have a home, those are like the main triggers for like, you need to get something in place so that someone else can help you. And where does all this stuff go? So that's probably the biggest one. Culturally, we've definitely seen the same thing where it's individuals are just afraid to plan. There's, they just have their own superstitions about that or whatever you want to call it. But there is that, but that everyone needs to do some kind of planning. Something we haven't really even touched on yet is just planning for being unable to make decisions for ourselves. So this is incapacity planning. And truly, this is some of the most valuable stuff that we can do for families is appoint agents to be able to make decisions for someone when they can't make a decision for themselves. And this could be, just the aging process, diagnosis of Alzheimer's, dementia, like any of those things. Or it could be something earlier in life, like a car accident or something else where, you're unable to make decisions for yourself. that can be such a challenging thing, not only for the person, but for the family and the dynamics of it all. Because if we don't have those powers of attorney in place, those are the documents that you really want to make sure you have a solid financial and medical power of attorney, so that you have people in your corner to make decisions for you if you can't. And the beauty of doing the planning is you get to pick who those people are. You get to pick when they act. You can, all those things are your choices. What are they able to make decisions on? Because otherwise you're just leaving it to the court. And to be honest with you, the court doesn't have the time to interview your entire family to figure out the family dynamics. They have a couple minutes to make this decision, and next thing you know, it's the kid who you thought is the most least responsible to be making these decisions. So putting these in place can be incredibly helpful, so that while you're navigating through, a loved one's, they were living at home today, tomorrow they need some help. Next thing you know, they're in assisted living or whatever, you can help them. That can be incredibly important.
That's excellent information. Again, that this is what, when I'm listening to this, there was so much information, and I know that I followed up with more questions, including, the fact that the age factor, sometimes you think that you don't even start thinking about these things until maybe you're in your 60s, but really based on the information that you're providing, what does the person feel like? What do they have to lose if they were to start it early? I was just, that was my impression at the end. Like, first of all, I don't think that you need to be at a certain age, but then to top it off, why not put into that, put that effort in ahead of time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's another big question we get, is like, at what age is this appropriate? And to be honest, as soon as you become 18, if you have kids going off to college or they're just not going to be around, once they turn 18, get some powers of attorney in place. We had one family we were working with. I think one of their kids was up at Michigan State. They were in a car accident, and they get the call that the person's in the hospital, but because there was no power of attorney in place, the doctor couldn't let the family know, like, is the person okay or what's going on? So what a panic the mom and dad had as they're rushing up to Michigan State to get to the hospital to figure out what's going on. I mean, luckily there was nothing really wrong. It just, they were doing evaluation or whatever, but that's a scary thing. And if you want to be able to talk to the registrar's office or any of those things for your kid while they're away at college, like, start doing some planning as soon as someone's 18. And then from there, it just gets more complicated. You start getting married, having kids, the layers kind of build on each other. So it starts pretty simple, and then we just build on that.
So what's your advice for people to do if they're interested to learn more about their situation? What's the first step that they need to do?
Great question. So we offer initial consultations. Call our office. It's the Rutkowski Law Firm, 248-792-9193. We'll set you up with an initial meeting. And the purpose of that meeting is to find out, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? But there's so much education that happens in that meeting, that is very unique to the individual, because we get to talk through, like, what's your family dynamics and relationships? What do your assets look like? Do you own property out of state? Like, we go through all of that and then find out what your goals are. And we can show you essentially what is possible. And we just always let any client that we're going to work with, they dictate what we should do. It's all based on, a family's goals.
So is it a long and complicated process?
It is not. Great question. The whole process itself takes anywhere between 4-6 weeks, maybe, depending on vacation schedules and everything. But it's not. I mean, they're pretty straightforward questions, like, what do you want to happen to your stuff? If you can't manage your stuff for yourself, who would you want to do it? A lot of times it's spouse and kids, and we walk you through in a very straightforward, understanding way. We don't get into all the legalese of everything. It's very easy to understand. I think that first step is a meeting with us just to see what your options are.
Okay, and I want to talk a little bit more about the Medicaid plans that are available for the elderly, and what you guys can do to help with the elderly, because I know a lot of people, and especially for our community, there's always more and more. Recently, some of the elderly are placed in elderly homes, but a lot of people still take care of their elderly in their homes. So
Great
can you
question.
explain about that a little bit, please?
Yeah, let's jump into that. So, In our elder law practice, we go through all of your options when it comes to paying for long-term care. So basically, if you need help, what are your options and how do you pay for it? And so the how to pay for it is a couple different ways. You either use your retirement savings to pay for whatever level of care you need. There's long-term care insurance, which isn't what it used to be. Unfortunately, it's very, very expensive and doesn't provide a great benefit. Then there's the Medicaid long-term care benefit and VA aid and attendance, so Veterans Aid and Attendance Pension. Those are great options if you ever need long-term care. Essentially, we help families qualify for that. It's a couple-prong test that you need to meet in order to qualify. They first look at, is the person disabled enough to need the care? That's easy enough to explain. If you need 24/7 care, you can qualify for that benefit. We next look at what's the income of the family. And as long as your cost of care is more than your income, so let's say you're receiving a pension and Social Security that totals $3,000 a month, and your cost of care is $10,000 a month, Medicaid would pay the difference. That $7,000 gap, Medicaid's going to pay for. So it's first, are they disabled to the point where they need the care? What is their income level? Is it less than their cost? And then they look at your assets. How much assets does this person have in order to qualify? And that's where we can help the most as elder law attorneys, because we have some strategies to get a person under the allowable amount. Essentially, as a married couple, you're allowed one house, one car, and $140,000 in assets. For a single individual, it's one house, one car, and $2,000 in assets. The beauty is that there are some trusts that we do that exempt assets. So we can hold assets that are above those thresholds in a certain type of trust. When we go to qualify for the benefit, you can automatically qualify. There is something called a 5-year look back, which means that the sooner we do planning, the better, essentially. But it's a strategy that certain types of trusts can help you get qualified for this benefit so that you don't have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 per month on your own care.
Wow, this is this is a lot of information. I mean, I love listening to this and learning about it. But you said earlier that you guys also, even though you're based in Michigan, but you do sometimes do uh, provide services for clients. I mean, not outside the state, right? Is all the information that you're providing basically for Michigan?
Yeah, great question. So we're licensed attorneys in Michigan. A lot of the trusts that we use are Michigan or federal based trusts. So we can help families outside of the state. But for the most part, we're helping families all over Michigan. We do a lot of Zoom meetings. So, we can help you and meet you where you're at. We also love to have family members be part of the meetings. Zoom has really helped with that, these virtual meetings, so that if you have kids that are out of state, they can Zoom right in, know what's going on. It has been truly a blessing. But for the most part, we are helping families in Michigan.
So I do see you have an event coming up on your website at the zoo. Is it? I did not write the date, but is it in September?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay, but it's on your website. Yeah, I didn't try I was learning more about you through the website, and I'm like, oh, they have interesting events. But you do this regularly, right? It seems that, like I said, I met you, and my cousin actually works in an elderly rehab home.
Okay.
Yeah, and it used to be called Heartland. I'm not sure what it's called now,
Okay.
but when she found out I was going, she said, "Oh yeah, they came and they provided information for us." So you do, if a facility or an area wants to do a workshop, they just
We're doing presentations all the time. I mean, we truly feel like education is the best starting point for estate planning. So we're doing events all the time, live in-person events. We do webinars. Check our website. It usually has most of our events. You can register for our newsletter, which then has the events on it as well. But yeah, we're always out in the community kind of having these conversations.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, this is the one thing also I really liked about this is because you always emphasize that this is educational. You wanted to educate people, like, first and foremost. And I think that's great. You were answering everybody's questions. I mean, it was really helpful. So Michael, with all this conversation that we had, and I know that you are bringing so much awareness to this by doing the different workshops, and people can contact you, like you said, your offices. We have a couple of minutes left, and what are the last things that you want to tell people to really kind of like where it can hit home and for them to understand the value of doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the reality is that we see the good, the bad, the ugly. And so not doing planning can really cause some problems in families. And what I see out of parents all often is just they wish they would have done planning to make things easier so that the family still gets along, because family's really everything. Um, just knowing your options is huge. Either do some research online, attend one of our events, have an initial consultation, but start educating yourself on what are the best ways to do planning. It really is a gift to the family, so that it puts everyone in a good peace of mind. They have the tools they need to help each other. I can't say enough, and that's why I'm in this practice. I'm just so passionate about it because it is so helpful to all the families that we work with.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for making the time to share this information with us. People can go, like you said, on your website to see upcoming events, which the zoo thing looks really interesting. So I might see you at the zoo. So thank you for this information. Thank you everybody for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.